I'd like to welcome you to Spinnaker's webinar on-demand series regarding organizational change management. In today's webinar, we will be going through a discussion around why change management is a critical component of any organization's supply chain transformation, whether that be a solution upgrade, an implementation of a new solution, business process, or even anything associated with a change to roles and responsibilities within your organization. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Mark Smith. I'm a director in Spinnaker's JDA consulting practice. I have roughly 20 years of supply chain management experience, both from industry, software, and consulting. So I've run the gambit from demand and supply planning through S&OP, distribution planning, warehousing, transportation, and even CRM. And as you can see from the slide here, a little bit about my bio. I've covered a vast majority of industries from retail and consumer goods, apparel and footwear, all the way through to automotive and manufacturing aspects associated with automotive. As I previously called out, quite a bit of experience both from a consulting and a software perspective as well as industry. And as you'll see here, just some of my notable Fortune 500 clients that I've had the fortune of working with over the years. What we would like to do today is discuss Spinnaker's view of organizational change management and provide an overview as to why organizational change management is important with any particular supply chain transformation, and provide an overview of Spinnaker's OCM framework. In on-demand webinar series, we will have discussions around organizational alignment and readiness, organizational design, training and organizational enablement, or as other individuals may call it, knowledge transfer, as well as communication. So with that said, I would like to go ahead and get into today's topic around OCM and Spinnaker's OCM framework. Now, a lot of organizations always wonder, particularly when you are speaking from a supply chain perspective and operationally, why do I even need any aspects of change management associated with supply chain? Supply chain is all about operations. It's about planning. It's about executing. However, in a survey that was completed by Towers Watson in 2013, as you can see here from this quote, companies that have high effectiveness in change management and communication are generally speaking three and a half times more likely to significantly outperform their peers. So you may be thinking as an organization, okay, I just need to change how my demand planners may do their job, or I may need to re-examine how my distribution planning folks work with my warehousing folks and my transportation individuals, without taking into consideration what does that change mean for all of those individuals. Does that change mean that there are impacts to their roles and responsibilities? Does that change mean there are impacts to the KPIs on which they will be measured? Do there need to be changes to the processes or the process flows that they follow to get their work done? All of these questions are generally answered as part of an overall organizational change management approach. And if you develop a sound approach and tie it to any type of this work, as you can see, you are significantly increasing your chances of success overall. Another interesting quote from an OCM perspective is really regarding how organizations are all about culture and how organizational change management is about that culture and how you influence that culture. So whereas culture does not necessarily change because we want it to, culture really changes, your organizational culture changes or is transformed when you actually engage the individuals within your organization, when you pull them into the discussions, when they are part of that road mapping discussion. So any type of initiative you are undertaking from a supply chain transformation perspective really needs to consider how you are going to pull individuals in your organization along on that journey. It is about a joint journey. It is about ensuring that from an organizational perspective, not only is leadership aligned, but all of the actual individual contributors within your organization are aligned. So from that perspective, it is important that you consider what the culture is of your organization and how organizational change management can be a key component tied with your cultural aspects. Now, for an effective supply chain management transformation to be successful, really change management is key. What I really want to hit upon here is if you look at the lower portion of this particular slide, you'll note that based on some previous studies that have been completed, 6 of 9 reasons projects fail are due to organizational or change matters. It is not due to any type of technology component. It is due to the actual organizational impact that may have been forgotten about or not considered in the work that you were doing. So if you think about that, whether you've invested $5 million or $10 million in an SAP solution or JDA solution or Oracle, simply investing those funds, you think you're going to get a certain level of ROI, a certain level of return with these particular implementations. But if you fail to consider that human aspect and how the individual human needs within your organization need to come into play, you are more likely to see a much lower rate of return on your investment, and you are also most likely bound to see a much successful rollout of the technology you may be implementing and or any business processes you may be creating or modifying. If we were to delve into a bit more detail around 6 of the 9 reasons as to why, generally speaking, supply chain projects fail, you can see right there a lot of it ties back to some of the topics I hit upon earlier that we will be discussing in future webinars. Anything from incomplete training to inadequate communication to a lack of executive commitment or alignment. All of these are key themes that are discussed as part of Spinnaker's overall organizational change management framework. Now, when an organization is choosing to pursue a supply chain transformation, it's really a multi-tiered process or multi-tiered steps that an organization should go through to make sure that you are well aligned for what that future state should look like. Generally speaking, most organizations, when you're initially defining what that target end state should be, it's pretty straightforward. Most individuals or organizations think, yes, I want to implement SAP. Yes, I want to investigate how some type of supply chain design program may help me optimize my network. And it's very simple to say something like that. But as you're going through those design discussions, that decision was straightforward, but the roles and responsibilities, the individuals, the communication, all of that becomes very key in making sure that you achieve what that target end state should look like. And likewise, if you look at it from a supply chain perspective, generally speaking, when you are thinking about all the various planning components tied from within the supply chain or various manufacturing aspects, whether you are a contract manufacturer or you're an OEM or whatever your role may be, generally speaking, the ideals and philosophies that most organizations are using are not necessarily that contentious or that problematic. But there are many different reference points in order to get you to where you need to be, many different sources of information. Your competitive environments may be different. All of these things help drive what your demand-driven supply chain or your maturity models may look like, or if you're more from a retailer perspective, what your overall omni-channel may look like. So while there's certainly no shortage of tools as to how you go about solving your myriad different problems depending on what industry you are in, when you actually want to try to move from where you're at, so moving from getting where you're currently at to moving to there, so moving from the here to there, this is where you really start to delve into where change management is key. So from a vision perspective, where you may have already thought about what you want that new end state to look like, what does that vision consider? What is that elevator pitch that you're going to put into your organization around what that vision is? In many types of supply chain transformation projects, that vision is often lacking. You don't have a clear picture as to what that vision is. You simply know you're going to implement a system or you're going to develop some new processes. And whenever an organization is doing some type of transformation, it is key that from a visioning perspective, that vision really ties together all of the components of the work that you're going to be doing. Likewise, really another key area when moving on the journey from here to there, it all revolves around the readiness and buy-in of the organization. So generally speaking, whenever you're doing any type of work from a transformation perspective, you are changing how people do their jobs. You are changing what their roles and responsibilities may be. And in turn, that may be impacting how the individuals or groups within your organization may view how they should be rewarded or recognized. And if you are in a process of rewards and recognition remain the same versus you are evolving your overall supply chain, right there you have issues that are in contention between how the people feel they are being monitored via their individual KPIs versus where you think the organization should go. And another key takeaway from an organizational alignment and readiness perspective is if you think about more longer-term employees, they will potentially begin to feel undervalued in the sense of you can't put what I know into a machine. So generally speaking, there are individuals that after having been with your organization, they are a wealth of knowledge. So part of an overall organizational change management approach is how do you build upon their knowledge and make sure that they are part of that journey. They are included as part of that readiness and buy-in with the transformation that you're going to be undertaking. The last component in the journey of getting from here to there is really around individual and organizational capability. So if you are going about developing new future state requirements, that can lead to issues where workloads are no longer in sync with the resources you have in place. And that can go one of two ways. Either you may have too many resources now for the work effort and initiative that is required, or you may have too few depending on the type of initiative that you are undertaking. Another area from a change management view and the actual individual is what type of best practices or leading practices are you going to be bringing to those individuals? How are you going to teach them their new jobs? What knowledge do they need to be successful? So really, all of those points that I just touched upon are about OCM, or organizational change management, and actually helping your organization move on that journey from getting from there to here. Making sure that when you get on the Titanic is actually going to sail across the Atlantic and it's not going to encounter that iceberg in the North Atlantic. In order to move forward on that journey, really it's about how you help a person adapt to that change. So change does happen at one person at a time. It's sort of a cliche in a way, but generally speaking, projects or even other activities globally, they are made on an individual basis. So understanding that your supply chain is operated by a multitude of different individuals and that their individual behaviors and performance drive the end-to-end operations of your supply chain. It's just not about the tools and the methods, but it's about the people and how you engage the people, and how when you engage those people, how they are either on board with the transformation and willing to go from the old to the new and willing to jump into what that new normal may look like. So if we look at it from a sort of a transformational perspective of moving from the old to beginning the new, there's always that area in the middle there of the neutral zone. So everybody is always comfortable with the old. They're comfortable with how things exist, and they are not willing to necessarily move on. And again, that is where OCM helps move individuals through that neutral zone and away from discomfort and loss. Oh, you're getting rid of my favorite system or my favorite report, and moving them through uncertainty up to the point where they realize, oh, this is probably a good opportunity for me. It's probably going to provide a lot of insight for me, provide additional skill sets that will be good for my career growth, and really get them on the path to what that beginning new process or that new system looks like, and then it becomes a promising journey for all of the individuals within your supply chain. So tying to a similar topic is really the change curve. If you look at the previous discussion around moving from the old to the new, it's really about moving also from the status quo to what those future capabilities look like. And all along that movement is a change curve. All projects go through this, whether you want to call it the storming, norming, forming type discussion, or if you look at it from a status quo through doubt to hope to capabilities, which means the individuals are committed to the change. It's all about moving individuals along that change curve. Now, Spinnaker's overall goal is to try to shift that change curve. So if you look at the red line on the graphic, generally speaking, this is a typical pattern as the life of a project progresses. But how do we hopefully lift up what that status quo is, and we minimize doubt a bit, and we increase hope more, and we get through that valley of despair a little bit more quickly? That means as an organization, whether you're doing it on your own or you're engaging implementation partners or consulting partners, it's about identifying how do we make sure individuals stay content, that they remain comfortable with the change that is coming, and we minimize that overall denial or loss or even incompetence associated with their view that it was sort of a stupid decision to make this change, and help move them along to, well, this is going to be good for your skills, good for your overall development, and ultimately lead to greater productivity and satisfaction. That is what an organizational change management framework is all about right there. Now, Spinnaker, when in developing our overall framework, we have a unique implementation methodology where we are actually using what we term our 5 lenses to highlight key areas where change is imperative. And this is both from a top-down perspective as well as a bottoms-up perspective. So out of the 5 lenses, which are composed of people, process, technology, which is where many organizations end at, we also include policies and metrics. The key thing from a top-down consideration perspective, and I just want to highlight a few here as it relates to change management, is first from a people perspective, you need to have sound executive advocacy. You need to have that leadership buy-in and the willingness and the ability of your leadership team to actually say, this is where we're going, this is the journey we're on, this is the vision that we have. So it ties back to the earlier discussion around ensuring that you have a solid vision in place. From a process perspective, where many technology-focused supply chain transformations fail, it is on that process work. Everybody tends to think, okay, just lift and shift, I'm going to install a new system. But you really need to ensure that from an organizational perspective, you are driving changes to your business processes and really identifying where the gaps and risk may still exist so that you can develop effective change management plans to resolve or at least help mitigate where those gaps are at. From a technology perspective, and it ties naturally to the discussion I just had on the process-first adoption, you need to ensure that there's some type of natural process alignment. So how does this new technology that we have chosen to implement, how is it tying into the overall business process requirements? Are your inventory planners getting what they need from the system? Or are there gaps with the technology and you need to develop new processes to mitigate those gaps? From a policies perspective, top-down, really there needs to be overall functional alignment. If you happen to be an organization that is moving away from what is the most common form of planning, Excel, and moving to some type of system application, whether that be Oracle or SAP or JDA, how are your functional roles changing? How do you need to align your policies around skill sets within your organization? Likewise, tying it on the metrics front, how do your KPIs need to be transformed? How do you need to ensure that you do not have contention between how your demand planners are measured versus how your transportation folks are measured, or even how your procurement folks are measured? Because generally speaking, there are KPIs and metrics that are in contention across these various groups, and that goes, of course, for manufacturing and most other aspects associated with your supply chain. If you're looking at it from a bottoms-up perspective, from a people side, it is identifying the pertinent stakeholders. Stakeholders, as you will learn in the upcoming webinar series, are very important for ensuring you have that engagement and that alignment across your organization. So identifying the appropriate stakeholders and making sure that they are engaged at the appropriate moments within your supply chain transformation process is very important. From a process perspective, a bottoms-up view, the day in the life. I cannot emphasize this enough. There are too many times from a technology or process transformation that simply one step or one sub-process is focused upon. But you need to really look at things from a holistic perspective. And if you assign a sound change management framework to your day in the life, this will readily call out where you may have gaps from a people perspective, a policy perspective, a metric perspective. Doing a day in the life mapping process of your end-to-end supply chain processes highlight very quickly where you need to make changes or modifications. And this ties precisely, if you do develop sound day in the life design process work, you then have the ability from the technology perspective to develop detailed system to process maps. These detailed system to process maps would allow you to quickly ascertain as well where you may have gaps from a technology perspective, and then from a change management perspective, you can determine how you want to work those gaps into an overall project, whether that means some bolt-ons you have to develop, whether that means modifying your business processes further. That all becomes a key component. And then the last two areas around policies and metrics. From a bottoms-up perspective, really the key guideline here is focus on the 80-20 rule. Don't focus on the exceptions that may be driving your supply chain transformation. Even if you do have a sound change management approach in place, or you're working with Spinnaker or another organization to help guide you through that change process, if you are getting bogged down on the 20%, change management is going to get bogged down as well. So it's imperative that from an overall top-down perspective and the executive advocacy and the vision clarity, that the leadership team of the project is very tuned in with where is that 80, where are we getting the value set. From a change management perspective, we are focusing on that 80% and not getting bogged down into a rabbit hole. So in order to move from an overall, along the supply chain transformation, organizational change management is embedded throughout the life of any type of transformation that is being undertaken. So from a Spinnaker view, that means from planning to assessing to designing to actually implementing and managing any type of supply chain work, Spinnaker embeds the organizational change management framework throughout. Now you might ask, how do we do that? So if you look at it from a planning view, really from planning it's how do we get from where we're at to where we want to go? And that could include road mapping. And that road mapping discussion and design should include, what does that mean for my organization? What does that mean for roles and responsibilities? What does that mean for aligning individuals within the organization? What does that mean for resources? What resources do we need to make sure we're successful? And in turn, whenever you're doing any type of planning exercise, how do we ensure that we manage your risk associated with any type of transformation program? From an assess perspective, it really becomes about where are we at, where do we want to be, what does that roadmap look like, and are we aligned as an organization? It's important that from an alignment perspective that you align around what those key messages are. And if we look at it from a design and implement perspective, really that becomes about what are the KPIs? Who should do what type of skills do I need? Are we progressing as planned? Is the communication consistent? How is the training going to be executed? And again, in future webinar series, we will get into Spinnaker's framework around how these questions are answered. And then ultimately, when you're coming towards the end of that supply chain transformation, it is about, are we getting the value that we expected? Are the systems working as designed? Are they stable? Are the metrics providing us the information? So that is really, at a high level, how Spinnaker goes about embedding OCM throughout the lifespan of a project. Now, this is a bit busy of a slide here, but really, if you look at organizational change management, it is about everything from vision through skills to incentive to resources to plan and to leadership. There are too many times with any type of project where there's a component missing, so leadership hasn't bought in or the vision doesn't exist. So generally speaking, that can lead to confusion on a project because you may be having conflicting messages from different leadership members, and you may have different competing visions, different political views within your organization. Likewise, if you don't have the necessary plan in place, if you don't have the correct plan in place, you have false starts. So from a holistic change management perspective, you need to have all of these components built into any type of transformation work that you're going to be doing. So with that said, I want to provide a brief overview of Spinnaker's OCM methodology and how it overlays with our complete implementation approach. So as you can see, we have the 5 lenses, which I discussed previously, being people, process, technology, policies, and metrics. And then generally speaking, we have the programmatic approach overlaying the entire implementation. And then we have, generally speaking, the 4 key phases of any type of work being done from assess through manage. Just as importantly, though, and this is where, again, many organizations fail, we also have overlaying organizational change management for all of this work that is being done. So whether you're talking current state review or best practices training as part of an assessment phase, or from a design perspective, you're talking requirement definition or any type of prototyping, all the way through to manage if we happen to be doing any type of managed services or support work for your organization, or performance tuning, organizational change management is embedded and overlaid across all of these activities. Now, if we look at our actual key differentiator from a Spinnaker perspective, our OCM framework is really composed of 4 key components. Overall, when we are working with organizations, we are coming in and sitting down with you to come up with an overall strategy. So what is your overall transformation project that you want to consider? And based upon the answer to that question, what type of strategy do we need to put in place? How do we need to define the scope and objectives associated with that strategy? And in turn, what is the approach and roadmap that we're going to use? And based upon that overall discussion around strategy, that then leads to appropriate frameworks and templates, which are broken down into the 4 key OCM components for Spinnaker, that being organizational alignment and readiness, organizational design, training and organizational enablement, and communication. Each of these can be tackled independently as part of any supply chain transformation work that you want to do, or if it is a large-scale footprint, they can be tackled holistically. So the framework has been built so that if you are an organization going through, let's say, more process design work, and you want to make sure that you have the right organization in place, then this may be an area where Spinnaker could help you with organizational design components. Or if you might have been using a particular application for a few years and you want some best practice training or leading practice or information on what the latest release has and how you could use it, that could be an area where just simply training and organizational enablement components of Spinnaker's OCM framework could be used. So with that said, I want to wrap up with the fact that really Spinnaker's framework is about these four components, these four aspects. In any type of large-scale implementation, generally speaking, it is very sound advice to include all four in any transformation work that you will be doing. But depending on any type of smaller scale work, the options do exist where each individual component could be done independently from each other. So with that said, I want to thank you for taking time today to listen to Spinnaker's view of change management and how change management is very important within any type of supply chain transformation. And I have provided a highlight of Spinnaker's organizational change management framework. Again, as I mentioned, in the future, we will be having future on-demand webinar series which go into more detail on Spinnaker's organizational and alignment readiness, communication, organizational design, and training and organizational enablement. I'd like to thank you for your time and hope to see you on the next webinar. Thank you.